Hello and welcome to ITV News Meridian.
The headlines in the southeast this Tuesday evening. Police want to speak to this man after a suspected acid attack in Eastbourne puts 3 people in hospital.
But to sort of go outside and be attacked and potentially could have been blinded, that was a bit of shock.
Petrol prices reach record levels as the cost of filling up the average family car hits £80. Advice tonight from motoring experts to maximise your miles to the gallon.
Also on tonight's programme, how high-tech drones and highly trained dogs are helping investigate serious fires and prevent future tragedies.
And great news for bird watchers, bad news for voles, the rare owls that have flown from Russia for warmer weather and better hunting in Sussex.
Good evening. A man caught up in a suspected acid attack in Eastbourne has been reliving what happened. He feared he was going to lose his sight after a liquid was thrown into his face.
Well, he was standing outside a bar in Eastbourne when a substance was thrown at him and 2 others. Tom Savides has this exclusive report.
This is the moment a man approaches a group outside a bar in Eastbourne and throws liquid over them. Moments earlier, he had been asked to leave the venue. The manager, Tommy, suffered burns to his face. 2 others, including Blue Leon, who was celebrating a friend's birthday, were also caught up in the suspected acid attack.
He's just gone bang straight into our faces. Fortunately, I managed to flinch and didn't get too much damage, but unfortunately Tommy sort of got the full impact of it and it's gone straight across his face, and unfortunately he's not doing too great at the moment.
How does that make you feel that something like that could happen?
It was shock at first. So going out on a night out for your friend's birthday, you don't think, oh, anything like that's going to happen. Just sort of go outside and be attacked and potentially could have been blinded. That was a bit of shock.
Sussex police have released this image of a man they want to trace in connection with the assault. It happened outside Blue Bar in the centre of Eastbourne last Friday night. Mr. Leon, who now has sight problems in his right eye, believes the substance he and the others were sprayed with may have been bleach.
I was in agony, it smelled, it burnt. Obviously Tommy ran in screaming, everyone as a sort of friendship group at the bar sort of supported him while all our eyes were getting washed out. I will not go out drinking again. I've already been invited, I'm just not interested. I've kind of lost that interest just because what if I go for another drink and something else happens?
All 3 men were taken to Eastbourne District General Hospital following the attack outside this bar. Police are now appealing for witnesses and information. The bar's manager appears to have borne the brunt of the attack, but it has left several others with emotional scars. Tom Savides, ITV News, Eastbourne.
On to other news this evening, and petrol prices have hit a record high, with the average cost of a litre of unleaded now at an eye-watering £1.48.
Increasing demand as the pandemic restrictions ease and tensions between Russia and the Ukraine are among the factors being blamed. So what do motorists in our region think? Charlotte Wilkins has been finding out.
It seems as far as the cost of living is concerned, the only way is up. Petrol is the latest to face a steep rise. At this Shell garage in Faversham, it'll cost you a staggering £1.52 per litre to fill up with unleaded, and even more if your vehicle runs on diesel. That's 4p more than the record average reported over the weekend. And it's a similar picture across our region. In Hove, there was mixed reaction from drivers.
I'm somebody that does a fair bit of mileage and it is costing me quite a lot of money. So, yeah, I think it's a disgrace.
If you want it, you pay it. If you don't want it, go off the road.
Have you considered getting rid of your car as a result?
Yes, I'd rather walk than because it's ridiculous, the price.
Since February last year, the cost of unleaded has gone up by a whopping 25p a litre. So that means that if you're filling up a family-sized car, it'll now cost you over £80. Even the supermarkets, which are usually known for their cheaper fuel, are seeing prices creep up. It's £1.44 per litre at both this Tesco in Maidstone and Sainsbury's in Ashford. Analysts predict that the cost of oil barrels could reach $125, meaning daily records could be on the cards for the coming weeks. If that's the case, then pressure may well be mounting on the government to step in and help. Charlotte Wilkins, ITV News, Hove.
Well, joining me is President of the AA, Edmund King. Could drivers be in for an even worse ride in the coming weeks or months? Do you think prices at the pumps look likely to go up even more?
Well, we've already seen record prices. There's still a great deal of uncertainty between Russia and Ukraine. Russia produces about a third of the world's oil, so that could technically increase prices. And also, we're seeing people travelling more. Businesses are back, freight is back to its normal levels, car use is back up to 90% of the levels. So all of those factors could push up prices towards £1.50 a gallon, really within days, if not weeks.
Now, traditionally, fuel has been cheaper at supermarkets, but that doesn't seem to be the case at the moment. Why is that, do you think?
Traditionally, many of the supermarkets use fuel as a loss leader to get people into the stores and buying goods from the shelves. With lockdown, we've seen more people actually shopping from home, getting deliveries to their home, and therefore there's less emphasis on some of the supermarkets for reducing their prices. So I think it's a combination of things.
What then could motorists do to maximise miles at the gallon? What's your advice?
Yeah, there is a lot that drivers can do. Firstly, think about that journey. Do you really need to take the car for that short journey? Can you walk? Can you cycle? Can you cut that journey out? Can you car share with somebody else? And also basic things can save 15% on fuel. Check your tyre pressures, take off the roof rack, take out heavy goods from the boot that you're not using, make sure your car's well serviced. And all of those things together, combined with your driving style, slowing down, no smooth or harsh braking, all of those factors mean that you can squeeze out an extra 15%. And that's certainly worth it at today's prices.
OK, interesting advice. Edmund King from the AA, thank you for joining me.
Well, political correspondent Phil Hornby is live in Westminster for us tonight. Phil, this is going to hit people already struggling. So what's the government going to do to help drivers?
Stacey, some factors are out of their control. Instability in Ukraine has led to the world price of oil going up. There's not much the government can do about that. They are responsible, though, for how much tax we pay. If you pay £1.50 for a litre of fuel, 25 pence of that goes on VAT and nearly 60 pence goes on fuel duty. Now, the government will say that fuel duty has been frozen for the last 11 years, and they say that freeze has saved the average motorist about £2,000. Nevertheless, prices are going up. Inflation seems to be everywhere, and even petrol stations are affected by that.
They're trying to be as competitive as they can on prices to help consumers, but at the same time, they're running a commercial operation and their costs have gone up. So you've had electricity treble, and a fuel station is a very power-hungry entity. And then obviously you've got other cost increases, such as direct labour costs as well. So it's a bit of a perfect storm, unfortunately, at the moment.
And Phil, with many bus services being cut and train fares higher than ever, many people would argue it's not viable to use public transport instead, is it?
No, many people, particularly those in rural areas, will say they really need a car. Prices are going up and we're in for a really rough few months, I'm afraid. This inflation problem is really going to dominate politics, I think, over the next few months. And it's interesting that economists can't agree on how long it's going to last. Is it going to be fairly short-lived, maybe all over in a year's time? Or is inflation here to stay?
Phil Hornby, thank you very much for that.
Well, you've been giving us your views on petrol prices, and that thought about public transport comes up here. As Linda Brown says, where she lives, public transport is so hit and miss that she needs her car to get to places like the local hospital.
And Rod Smith says he uses buses wherever it's practical, even though he's close to the town centre. There's only one bus every 2 hours.
And Charlie Bailey says the way to solve the problem is for the government to lower VAT from 20% to 17.5%. Thanks, as always, for getting in touch. You can continue the conversation on our Facebook page.
More of the day's news now, and the Lower Thames crossing will include 20 kilometres of new or improved pathways in Kent, according to National Highways. The proposals shown in these new images include paths, cycle routes, bridges and bridleways. New plans for the crossing connecting Kent and Essex are due to be submitted later this year.
Worthing has been named as the second cleanest town in England. The country's 55 largest urban centres were ranked based on air and water quality, climate and green behaviour.
A new exhibition about Charles Dickens' life has opened in Rochester. The Making of Mr Dickens at the Guildhall Museum explores his childhood in Chatham and the inspiration he took from living around Medway. It includes a giant replica model of his childhood home, followed by a small theatre stage showing a short film about his life.
Now, specialist teams of fire investigators, along with aerial drone operators and sniffer dogs, will now work across the southeast to investigate the cause of the most serious fires.
It follows a major new agreement between the 4 fire brigades covering Kent, Sussex and Surrey, which it's hoped will lead to higher standards of investigation and prevent further tragedies.
Well, our reporter Kit Bradshaw has been to find out how it'll work in practice.
Fire call. Fire call.
When a 999 call comes in, the firefighters are in the engine and driving out the door in less than a minute. But an equally important part of their job involves preventing blazes breaking out in the first place. When crews were called to this Eastbourne home, they were confronted by a smouldering charred void where the staircase once stood.
Although the call came in the morning, the fire started the previous evening, and it started in an understairs cupboard where the electrical intake was. And what was peculiar about this fire was that it just smouldered ever so slowly all through the night, created lots of smoke, destroyed the staircase. So in order to gain access to the first floor, the fire crews had to erect ladders where the staircase would have been just to get up there.
Sadly, the homeowner lost their life as a result of this slow-burning fire.
The investigator recognised that this wasn't the first time he'd seen fires like this.
The complex investigation that followed had far-reaching consequences.
It's resulted in changes in the wiring regulations. It's involved changes to the guidance that the meter operators use when they're inspecting and reading meters, etc.
This case really highlights the importance of effective fire investigation.
Absolutely. You know, our main aim with fire investigation is to identify and understand the causes of fire so that we can hopefully prevent those same things happening again to people in the future.
2-year-old Labrador Zuki can help sniff out clues of possible foul play. Her nose can detect the smallest trace of flammable liquid, like this cotton bud soaked in petrol. Hidden in the crack of a wooden bench for a training exercise, and found again within seconds. She and her handler Steve will now be working across the southeast thanks to a new joint agreement. Between them, the 4 fire services involved have 33 trained investigation officers who'll operate over county borders. Last year, they were responsible for 214 complex investigations into serious fires. As part of the new collaboration agreement, the 4 services will work together on training their fire investigators and will also share specialist resources as required, from dogs to drones.
We've managed to develop the capabilities within our fire and rescue services. For instance, we've seen the drone and we've seen the dog. So Kent don't have a fire dog, but we're able to call the dogs in from other fire and rescue services, which gives us that ability that we wouldn't be able to provide ourselves.
But it's not just staff and equipment which will be shared routinely, but also data.
The bigger pool of data we can use, that gives us a greater understanding of trends. So for instance, if there's a problem with a certain type of washing machine, if we're getting fires in a certain demographic area, we can then put our resources in our prevention team to work in those areas of the community.
It's hoped the new regime will help raise standards of investigation across the region and ensure the specialist skills of the fire brigade's humans and canines are put to good use. Kit Bradshaw, ITV News, Horsham.
Well, you're watching ITV News in the Meridian region. Thank you for being with us tonight. We really do appreciate it.
Coming up, Wise move. The rare owls that have been left have frozen north to winter and hunt at Seven Sisters in Sussex.
And the next 3 days bring two named storms. Tomorrow we've got Storm Dudley, but we're particularly concerned about Storm Eunice on Friday. Join me later in the programme for the latest details.
And for more on all of our stories, just head to our website, itv.com/Meridian. You can call us, the number 0808 1010 095. And remember, you can also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter.
Next tonight, there's growing evidence of the impact the pandemic has been having on the country's mental health. Government figures released this month show more than half of adults still felt anxious about the effect COVID is having on their lives.
Well, as we heard last night, many people turn to art and other creative pastimes to cope with the stress and loneliness. But how does a hobby like painting help with our mental health? Kevin Ashford has been finding out.
Farah Syed believes art has the power to change lives, both for those who create it, like her, and those who look at it.
I know I'm going to feel better when I've left the studio, having created all day, or even if it's just an hour, at home even. So it has helped me on many levels, with anxiety and stress. Also, it gives me a huge sense of satisfaction to share this with others. That in itself gives me a high, because I've seen how experiencing art and creating art can help people, and to be able to share that with others is a real joy.
Farah's not alone in seeing the positive impact that participating in art, both creating and consuming, can have. Tracy Jackson is the head of the Heart of Kent Hospice dementia team.
Arts enable people living with dementia to communicate when the dementia has robbed their ability to communicate verbally, so they can express themselves in alternative ways, such as painting, sculpting, dancing, music, etc.
Now, there's not a huge amount of scientific research that's been done in this area, but the studies that have been carried out suggest a couple of things are happening when we're doing something creative or even just appreciating a work of art. Firstly, the levels of cortisol, that's the stress hormone in our body, go down, and the levels of dopamine, that's a neurotransmitter that makes us feel good, go up. And then there's the benefits to our mental health of simply losing yourself in what you're doing.
When we are anxious, we're negatively forecasting the future. And in depression, we're negatively looking at the past, our negative memories from the past. When we do something like art, it brings us right to the very present, right now. So we're not doing either of those things, the negative things. We're now in this very perfect moment where you are safe, you are happy. And once you get into that flow state, absolute magic happens. It's perfect.
Government surveys would indicate that a large number of people have taken up a creative pastime in the last couple of years, a sign that many of us have turned to art to cope with the stresses of the pandemic. Kevin Ashford, ITV News.
And the ITV Evening News Hour continues with the national and international news at 6:30. With the details, here's Mary Nightingale.
Coming up on the programme, Prince Andrew and Virginia Giuffre reach a settlement in the civil case filed in America. The out-of-court agreement means the Duke of York won't have to give evidence in the sex abuse case. We will have all the details. Also ahead, Russia claims it's withdrawing some troops from the Ukrainian border, but NATO and the West insist they have seen no evidence of that yet. Plus, a special report on the use of performance-enhancing drugs in rugby league. Two players tell us why they use them. Do join me for that and more at 6:30.
Thanks very much, Mary. Now, I hope this doesn't put you off your dinner if you're feeling a bit squeamish. But have you ever thought about keeping a colony of worms in your kitchen or your garden shed?
I can't say I have.
No, nor have I.
No.
Never.
Well, scientists say these wriggly invertebrates have the potential to drastically cut our organic waste, with the added benefit of turning it into a nutrient-rich compost.
And we're now seeing a growing number of domestic wormeries popping up across our region. Nick Smith has been finding out more.
As they spend most of their lives hidden away in the undergrowth, you may be forgiven for not giving the humble worm much thought. But for the green-fingered among us, they can be a very powerful ally. Sarah Edwards has her own worm farm near Battle in East Sussex and says after knowing little about them before she started, she now sees the huge benefits for herself.
Worm farms are great because they're really versatile in just picking up all of the extra scraps you'd make when preparing vegetables, for example. And they're not actually that labour intensive. So the benefits are that you kind of just, layer up the farm and you kind of just close the lid and let the worms do the work.
Anna de la Vega heads up a project which has received lottery funding to encourage 1,000 new wormeries. She says you can make one very inexpensively in your kitchen in a spare bag for life.
You can use shredded paper, which is the cheapest way to do it, or you can use coconut coir or compost. So this is just bedding, this is starter bedding, and they'll live in this. And then we've got our worms here. So they thrive in fresh rotting waste and you'll find them in your compost bin. So you want some tiger, they're called tiger worms, and cardboard. So worms will eat anything that's natural. I like to put a sheet on top to keep them happy. So put our cardboard on top. The best thing is to bury the food waste to stop attracting fruit flies. Put a bit more spray in there. And literally that is how it's done. Really, really simple. Anyone can do it.
Worms act as nature's very own recyclers of organic waste. They will quite happily chew on the likes of an old banana skin to a pair of your old socks. The added benefit is that you get free compost out of it. They also have the potential to greatly reduce the amount that we send to landfill each and every year. Composting worms aren't just ordinary earthworms you might find in your garden, and many people source them from suppliers like Ken Nelson. He's been breeding hundreds of thousands at his commercial worm farm, and tells me a growing number of people are looking to start their own wormeries as we become more environmentally conscious.
Imagine you're having worms as pets. Reduce all your food waste because they'll gobble it all up. It's win-win-win, right? Over the years, you'd be saving, say a family, you'd be saving 1/2 ton of waste from landfill. And what does the worm do with the worm? They turn it into bestest fertiliser on planet Earth.
It's a process they've been refining for millions of years, so it's really no surprise that worms are a very effective natural and low-tech solution to help us deal with our waste and give back to the planet. Nick Smith, ITV News.
Oh, I hope you're not having spaghetti for dinner. That's for sure. It's going to put you off, isn't it?
It's not for me.
It's clever, but I wouldn't want them in the kitchen.
Our director Meridian has a wormery and she swears by it.
Well, lucky for me, I'm not sure I'm going to follow suit.
She can keep it. There's something that likes worms now, and they're unusual visitors from the frozen north, but rare short-eared owls have become a welcome sight at a nature reserve in Sussex over the winter.
That was hard to say, wasn't it? Yes, conservationists say that work to improve the habitat at Seven Sisters Country Park has boosted the number of voles, and unluckily for the voles, they happen to be the owls' favourite food. Malcolm Shaw has the story.
They're big, they're bold and they're beautiful. Short-eared owls hunting are a spectacular sight. They're winter visitors flying here to escape harsher conditions in Russia and Scandinavia. And this year they've turned up in record numbers at Seven Sisters Country Park, as Ranger Laura Clapham told me.
They're mainly crepuscular, so they hunt at dawn and dusk. We've seen them in the afternoons hunting over these fields. We've seen sort of little squabbles over hunting grounds between the owls. So it's been very special.
The South Downs National Park Authority took over the management of the site last summer. They've brought in Exmoor ponies and Sussex cattle to graze areas which have become smothered by long grass and scrub. It's all part of a project to restore the extremely rare chalk grassland habitat.
They called it the rainforest in miniature, so within 1 square metre we can have up to 40 different species of plant, and then you've got all the insects, the butterflies, and then surviving on those you've got all the birds that will survive on those, so we get a really diverse habitat on this chalk grassland.
So what have we got here, Laura?
Yeah, so this is what we've been looking for. This is a little vole run.
The conservation work is already having an impact. There's been a huge increase in the number of field voles, which just happen to be the short-eared owl's favourite prey.
You see the owls sort of hunting really low to these fields, so they're right above the voles should one pop its head out.
And that's that.
And that's that for that particular vole.
Birdwatchers have captured great close-ups of the owls. Soon they'll be gone, flying north to nest. But until they return, there's plenty more wildlife here to enjoy. Malcolm Shaw, ITV News, Cookmere Haven.
Oh, they are beautiful, aren't they? Stunning photos there. Holly joins us now. Holly, 2 storms in 3 days coming up.
Yes, that's right. So Dudley for tomorrow. The worst of the weather a bit further north, but nonetheless a windy old day. We're particularly, though, concerned about Storm Eunice on Friday. So let's take a look at how that's developing. Very strong jet stream at the moment. It's powering this area of low pressure. So an early spell of heavy rain on Friday, and then there is some uncertainty about where the centre of this low goes, but we know we're going to get the strongest winds around the southwestern flank of it.
So how do you know where exactly the low will go then?
Yeah, well, that is quite tricky. One thing we can do is we can take a model and run it with lots of slightly different starting conditions. So it's a bit like playing poo sticks. If you had a handful of sticks and dropped them in a river, some of them would take quite a similar path down the river and some of them would take quite a different path. And looking at that spread of where those sticks end up is a bit like looking at the possible forecasts, okay? So let's take a look at the possible forecast for this. Now, the line furthest to the north here is potentially as far north as the centre of the low could go, and all of the models really take the centre of the low somewhere between these 2 lines. Now, if it does go further north, we will tend to find the worst of the weather a bit further north than us. However, if it comes further south, that's when we're going to get clobbered with the worst of it. So we could, in that case, see gusts, perhaps an exposure up to around 80 miles an hour. However, there is a third scenario. Some of the models don't really want to develop this feature at all, and if that was to be the case, it would be a much, much quieter day. So still a lot to play for. That's the most unlikely scenario.
Oh,
I think the likely scenario... Sorry, more likely that it's going to be, I think, very disruptive, potentially damaging.
OK, well, all this grim weather, it's lucky we've got your dress to brighten things up,
The
haven't
only
we?
way of sunshine tonight, that's for sure.
Well, let's get all the grim details now. Here's Holly.
Feels like home, whatever the weather. Valent Boilers and Heat Pumps sponsors ITV Meridian Weather.
Yes, a very unsettled look into the coming days. You've got spells of rain coming and going and some strong winds. Tomorrow is a windy day, but it's even windier thanks to Eunice arriving on Friday. So let's look at the bigger picture then. We've got one system with us for tonight. We've got another one, that's Dudley, for tomorrow. And then Eunice winds its way up for Friday. As I say, some uncertainty about the detail, but potentially a very windy story with a warning already in force. Out there at the moment, it's quieter, but it doesn't last. Thickening cloud, outbreaks of rain spilling in, the southwesterly winds strengthening all the while. Turning increasingly mild, though, as the night goes on. So temperatures 10, 11 degrees by the tail end of things. A bit murky, I think, in places as well. So as we push through our Wednesday, I think quite a cloudy start. You may well see some bright spells coming through at times, although cloud will probably tend to thicken again later. A few dribs and drabs of rain perhaps, but there's wind strengthening all the while. So as we head through the afternoon into the evening, we could see gusts and exposure getting up to, say, 50 or 55 miles an hour. It is, though, despite all that, very mild. So temperatures 13, 14 degrees, maybe even a little bit higher than that, but obviously offset by the strength of the wind. Our high tide times, you've got Dover at 11:04 and again at 11:25 as we push into the evening. And finally, the outlook. So I think on Thursday you may well get some bright spells, perhaps a few showers in the mix. Still quite windy, but I do think those winds will have eased down compared to Wednesday. But Friday is Storm Eunice. There is some uncertainty, but we have already got that warning in force with the risk of the most exposed locations getting gusts perhaps up to even 80 miles an hour. Take care.
Valent sponsors ITV Meridian Weather.
Well, that's all from us so far this evening. In just a moment, the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Yeah, Stacey has our late news, but from all of us here, thanks so much for your company this evening. Do join us again tomorrow. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.